Hi everyone, I'm Aro Ogorian with ACap Advisors and Accountants, and welcome to another edition of the ACap Recap. Traditionally, we answer some of the most frequently asked questions we receive from you. However, every once in a while, we bring in subject matter experts to talk about a very specific topic. And today we're going to have Ben Sarto with Gordon Insurance. He's going to talk to us about cybersecurity insurance, which is extremely important, especially nowadays with so much ransomware and cyber attacks that are occurring on websites. It's a very apropos subject matter. So stay tuned. We're going to have Ben Sarto on in a few minutes. Get started. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm very pleased to introduce Ben Sarto with Gordon Insurance. Ben is a property and casualty insurance agent, which means that he deals with commercial properties, residential properties, and today he's going to talk to us about cybersecurity, which is a huge and growing field in insurance. So welcome, Ben. Great to have you. You're a great friend of mine. I'm excited to do this with you.
All right, thank you so much for the kind words and for having me this morning. I'm very excited to be here and honored, and thank you everyone for the time and the opportunity. So cyber insurance, cybersecurity is obviously a huge, huge deal right now. There's been large hacks in the business world. JBS plan, even an insurance company called CNA had a huge cyber attack. And a lot of customers' information was leaked. It's a big deal. So cyber insurance is also a relatively new line of coverage. It used to be included in your regular general liability policy, but it was limited. It didn't have that much coverage. It was not really known or used. It's really been implemented more in the past 10 years, since about 2010. When the internet was really on fire and people were really online and storing critical data and information on customers, when it really became its own line of coverage.
Can you first maybe define like what cyber insurance is? Like, I mean, I'm sure some people know out there what it is, but for the people who don't know what it is, what does it really entail? I mean, I get the impression it has to do something with the internet, but I'm sure it's more than that.
Right, exactly. So basically, in layman's terms, cyber insurance is a data breach that occurs when an unauthorized party gains access to digital assets on your business's network, on hardware, software, even mobile devices like a cell phone.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yep. And these types of data breaches are things you've heard of, like phishing scams, malware attack, ransomware. If your computer gets a virus, so you get a hardware malfunction, that is what is covered by cyber insurance. And an example of a digital asset would be employee records. So if you are taking credit card information over the phone and storing it, date of births, as an insurance broker, I have, birthday information, I've got VIN number info, driver's license, a lot of sensitive data. As a CPA, RA, you might have financial statements and other financial information on your clients. That's a digital asset. So if things like that ever get accessed by an unauthorized party, that's when a cyber breach or a cyber incident has occurred.
How do you do how does an insurance agency do the pricing? Because I'm assuming that, what data do they look at? Obviously, you have large companies and small companies. Do they look at how many clients you have? And how does the pricing work on it? Not so much like how does the pricing work, but how do they determine the pricing?
Sure. So a big aspect and a big factor on pricing comes from the revenue of the company. That's really how they decide and determine how large of a company your business is, and how much access you have to employee information. Obviously employee count is pretty big, but it's really comes down to revenue, which determines the size of the business. Two other factors I would say is the amount of coverage you're requesting. So if you're requesting, limits up to like $5 million, which is very high for a cyber insurance policy, that's going to cost you obviously a lot more than a policy for, let's say, 100,000. or 500,000.
How do you know? How do you know how much to get? I mean,
right. So again, that you'll leave up to your insurance broker, and they'll discuss it with the underwriter. Like I said, cyber insurance is a relatively new line of coverage to be standing on its own. Like it used to be wrapped up with general liability, and there's experts on it. And I don't claim to be an expert in cyber insurance, but I have written enough policies that I know what goes into it and what companies and clients of mine would benefit more than others. And the underwriters, though, is who I personally, as an insurance broker, fall back on, because these guys are experts in it. They are experts in the field. They do this all day, every day. While I might focus on some commercial real estate and homeowners insurance and cyber, all these guys do is cyber.
Wow,
so
okay.
if you really want to know how much your particular business should have, and do you need certain coverages, all the coverages, just some, that is when you have a conversation with your broker and really get the guidance there.
Okay. I know you mentioned article. I really think that it's probably a good idea for you to take all this information that you have, which you do have a lot, and even though you claim you're not an expert, you know a lot more than me and probably most of the people listening and watching this. So I'd really recommend you kind of put that into an article, and we can post it on our website and put it in our YouTube channel as well. Do you have a couple of case studies you can use, like maybe some examples of some clients you've had that have experienced this and utilized it?
Sure. So thankfully, none of my clients have experienced a cyber attack, or they have experienced cyber attack, but not had to call upon the cyber insurance yet.
Okay.
I hope it stays that way, honestly.
Let's hope, yeah.
Exactly. But what I was thinking about doing was there's 5 main coverages on the cyber policy, and I was thinking I'd go through each one.
Oh, awesome.
And give a clear explanation of what that coverage will protect your particular business from.
Awesome. I'm going to take notes as you're talking about the 5 different coverages.
Perfect. And also, like you mentioned, I'm happy to write an article, and you can post it where the listeners can go and save it as a PDF and have it on hand. So the first coverage that you're likely to see on a cyber policy is called network security. And that covers first-party costs or expenses that you or the business incurs as a result of a cyber attack. So that covers things like legal expenses, IT forensics, where you have a team, and that is usually supplied by your insurance company, where they'll have a team of cyber forensics to go out into the web and collect and try to get your data and try to recover everything that was lost. Negotiation and payment of ransomware, which are the big ones. So if there's a ransomware, where you have to come up with $1 million, to get your client's information back, they will pay that. That's what it covers.
Will they even also pay if it's in Bitcoin? Because a lot of people are asking for Bitcoin nowadays.
Great question. So honestly, that's an area where I would go to an underwriter and say, does this cyber policy cover for Bitcoin and electronic funds? So that's a whole new realm that the cyber insurance world has to now adjust to. So
right.
Great question. And just a couple more examples. They'll set up a call center for your company and your business. So if your employees or your clients call in and say, what's happening, I need information, they will set up a call center for you and take those calls and field those questions. They also have things like public relations expertise. Mm-hmm. So if it's on the news, local or even national, depending on the size of your business, they will have public relations experts help your company regain its image.
Wow.
And then, of course, just one other nice thing is they will do credit monitoring and identity restoration for the business and for your clients and employees. So it's a really broad range of coverages, and that's just one part of cyber insurance. So this is giving you and your listeners an idea of how vast this area is.
And this all falls under the umbrella of just the first one, the network security?
Just network security.
Wow, okay.
So then we've got privacy liability as the second main coverage you're likely to see. And that protects your company from liabilities arising out of a cyber incident or privacy law violation. So, it'll defend your organization from any consumer class action lawsuits and funding a potential settlement in the event of a cyber incident or a data breach. So that's a pretty big one because, assuming there ever was a cyber attack, most likely you're going to be dealing with privacy liability.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. Third was network business interruption. So if your network or the network of a provider that you rely on goes down due to an incident, you can recover your lost profits or any fixed expenses or extra costs that incurred during that time. So this is kind of like a business income or loss of income coverage, where if your network or the network of a provider goes down that you rely on to make money, basically, any lost income you can collect through network business interruption.
Wow. So for example, let's say if I use a particular CRM software, client relationship management software, and for some reason that software goes down for a week, and now like it's interrupting my ability to interact with clients or do billing or whatever it might be, that would qualify under this, network business interruption?
Yep, exactly.
Oh, fantastic.
Obviously, I have to put a disclaimer just for legal purposes. Right. I'm not a appraiser. I'm not saying yes, 100% guaranteed every claim will be covered. I have to. That's just the world we live in now. But these are what coverages are supposed to be protected for on all these policies. So fourth, we've got media liability, and this is actually a really interesting one. So this provides coverage for intellectual property infringement, other than patent infringement, obviously, but resulting from advertising your services. And it applies to both online advertising and printed advertising. But one thing that I want to really highlight is social media posts. And I actually have a friend whose wife has a very large social media following on Instagram, and she reposted a picture from another account. We repost pictures on Instagram every single day. She did this, but it was from business perspective. It was from her business, Instagram business account. And she got sued by this Instagram account.
Wow. Why?
She did not have written permission from this account to share their post for business purposes. And it was an infringement on their intellectual property.
That is wild. I thought that, I'm not, active on Instagram, but I just thought that, people are sharing stuff all the time and it's in the public domain and it's not really.
They do. And I think the big kicker on this one is that we share posts usually as for personal reasons, just for, sharing from a personal standpoint, sharing a funny picture or a video. But I believe because she was doing it under a business pretense, so that became an infringement because it was used in a business setting.
Interesting.
So I thought that was a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, keep beware of whatever you're posting, especially in a business setting. So that's good information.
Yep. And then lastly, number 5, we've got E&O, and that's classic errors and omissions under the cyber coverage. So E&O under cyber insurance will cover claims arising from errors in your performance to perform your services. So this can include anything from technology services, which is obviously the big player in the cyber world, but it can also affect people like consultants or even lawyers, doctors, CPAs. It essentially addresses allegations of negligence or breach of contract in the scope of your work. And that will cover legal defense costs and any settlements with the customers.
So is there a lot of overlap between the regular E&O coverage and this is considered cybersecurity E&O, or this is really just under all of the cybersecurity policy in and of itself?
Right. So someone not in the technology field, like a doctor, a lawyer, a CPA, your E&O is going to protect you for, those classic E&O, allegations like, the guy didn't write my books correctly, didn't balance things the right way, or the doctor had a classic medical malpractice event. But in terms of if the cyber event was the cause of the negligence or the error, then that's when it'll fall under the cyber coverage.
Okay.
So again, it's always cyber related, but if the cyber causes an E&O scenario, that's what covers.
Okay. Wow, this is fantastic. I mean, truly, I had no idea that cybersecurity was so vast and it covered so many different areas of it. I highly recommend you write that article that we talked about. So it'll be enormously beneficial. Anything else related to cybersecurity that we haven't already covered that you think is important?
Sure. So I put down on my notes, there's something called sublimits, and that's in pretty much every policy, cyber, liability, property, anything you get, there's going to be something called sublimits. And these are little extra, I call them bells and whistles, that are not in your main categories of coverage. So I jotted down 3 that I thought everyone would be interested to hear about. And just know that there's a lot more, and it really shows how vast these insurance policies are, what they cover, and how important they are truly, and we don't really fully appreciate it. So 2 things, and I kind of touched upon them in the coverage above, but there's something called social engineering and coverage, and that's a sublimit. And phishing emails, for examples, if you have an employee who is duped by a phishing email, an email comes from the CEO, and it says, "Mr. Employee, please wire X amount of funds to me immediately." And the employee unfortunately falls for it and sends the funds to the hacker. That is a coverage that's covered under social engineering, where they engineered another person's identity essentially in the company and extorted the business for money. So that's one. Yep.
So that would have to be like a rider, like it's in addition to the regular policy that you'd have to get, or it's included within it?
So it's not a rider, because a rider technically is something you have to add on.
Okay.
It's a sublimit. So it's not, you're going to have your main 5 coverages with whatever limit of insurance you purchase. So let's say you buy a $1 million cyber policy. Those top 5 that we spoke about earlier are going to have a $1 million limit. Okay. Sublimits are going to have their own limits of coverage. So they're not going to go up to $1 million, but they'll have their own sublimits. Okay. And that could be, a $10,000 sublimit. It could be a $100,000 sublimit. That's when you have to talk to your broker and really look into your policy and see what those are.
Okay.
And then one other that I'll just add is something called bricking. And I think this is a pretty interesting one.
Bricking?
Bricking.
Okay.
BRICKING. And it's funny because it's essentially exactly what it sounds like. If your laptop turns into a brick, essentially, if it is unusable because of a hack, a virus, some malware, and it's a brick, it's as good as a brick, this sublimit will pay for a new laptop. So, if part of this, hacking and malware attack, the company is extorted for money, that will come from coverage elsewhere in the policy. But if you need to buy a new laptop now because your laptop is unusable, you look at your bricking coverage, you see what your sublimit is, hopefully it's at least $5,000, and you get yourself a brand new Mac.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So
let's talk a little bit about deductibles, because obviously with insurance, you want to know what your deductible is. I mean, let's just continue with this computer example. If your deductible is $5,000, but your laptop costs $1,000, obviously you're not going to claim an insurance claim for it. How do the deductibles work? I'm assuming there's like different levels of them, and kind of how does that work?
Yeah, so again, it's going to really come down to the limits of coverage you buy, and the size of your business, and what you as a company feel you can do. So I have clients who have $5 million cyber policies. It's required by the contracts they run, because they're also working on third-party networks and software.
Right.
So it's a huge liability. Their deductibles are $30,000.
Wow. Okay.
And it will, if there's a cyber attack, their claim is going to be significantly over $30K. $30,000 is something they can do. It will totally make them whole again. For bricking coverage, for instance, like you're saying, because that seems like a perfect coverage for maybe a smaller business, where a $5,000 laptop expense is a big deal.
Right.
Like deductibles can be as low as $1,000. They could be $500. It just depends on where you want your annual premium to be and what coverage you need at the end of the day. Also, some sublimits can be deductible free. So depending on the carrier and the way your policy is set up, sublimits might not be subject to a deductible. So again, talk to your broker about your specific policy because there are a lot out there and a lot of changes between each one.
Well, hopefully they reach out to you when they're thinking about who they're going to contact for cyber insurance and other things. Anything else related to cyber insurance that we haven't discussed that's important to cover?
Yeah, so I have more notes here, but I know that I've already shared a ton, and I think it would be beneficial that I write up an article that everyone listening can just print out and read on their own, because I know it's a ton of info. But again, one thing to keep in mind is that a cyber insurance policy, it covers first and third party claims. So it covers your personal business, it covers your network, your expenses, but it also covers third parties. So if a company is hacked or on their network or their email, and let's say they have outside vendors or freelancers working on things, it's going to come back to you. So quick example, let's say you're a social media marketing manager for a company and you do freelance work on their website and their website is hacked and all their revenue comes from online purchases. This company is going to come after you because you work on their website and they're going to say, it's very possible that some work you did left a vulnerability in our defenses, in something, and they're going to sue you. And they will sue every single party that ever touched their website. Wow.
I don't know if you remember this, but this was probably about 10 years ago. There was this fire that occurred in a club in New York City, where it was this band that was playing, and then like some pyrometric type thing or pyrotechnic, fire started, and it resulted in some loss of lives. And there was this, I think it was an attorney that gave a presentation where she was talking about how all the people that got sued related to this fire. It was like the beer distributor, the owner of the building, everyone, like the lighting, everyone got sued because they were just casting this wide net trying to get everyone involved in this lawsuit. So it was very interesting how that worked.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of how the legal system works these days. And really, I mean, for so long it's worked this way, where there is any sort of loss of life, God forbid, but even loss of income, which is just as important today. For businesses and the way the world works, that you really and businesses really need to make sure that they have their coverage in place. So, E&O insurance, errors and omissions, and general liability, those are the basics. Everyone should carry those two coverages without question. Right. If you run a business, if you run any sort of business that ultimately is storing sensitive personal data, information on clients, even employees. If you work on other companies' cyber tech exposures, really, really strongly consider cyber, whether it's through me or someone else. It protect yourself, protect your business. At the end of the day, the premiums are going to be a lot less than a payout out of pocket. That's no question about that.
Seems like a no-brainer. So I look forward to that article, Ben, about cybersecurity. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more meat on that bone when you write it, and I'm happy to share it with our viewers and our audience. Obviously, you do a lot more than cybersecurity. Tell us a little bit about you, how long you've been doing this for, the firm that you work for, and kind of what your specialties are.
Sure. So, I work for Gordon Insurance. We're a small brokerage up in Northern California. The business itself has been around for 40 plus years, specializing in commercial real estate. I've been in the business for 5 years now, and just jumped headfirst also into commercial real estate. Obviously had a crazy good support over at the brokerage there. I'm located in Beverly Hills, but I've got clients in Northern California, Southern California, and maybe 30 plus states right now.
Wow.
So it's not limited to California. Cyber insurance for sure is easy to go national. Property insurance is a little different. Every state has its intricacies, like Texas with the wind and hurricanes on the East Coast, obviously, as we're seeing. But that's my specialty, really, is commercial real estate. But more and more every day, cyber insurance is creeping in, becoming more of a question from clients. Just like earthquake insurance, it's becoming more of an interest.
Okay, well, that's the reason why we have you on today. So we're happy to have you. Thank you for joining us, Ben. Any closing thoughts or any closing statements before we kind of wrap it up?
All I'd say is, Ara, if you have, on the YouTube comments, if you want to put my email address where your listeners can reach out with questions. I am not poaching for business. I'm not saying you have to get a quote, but oftentimes, even as a consultant, bounce questions off me. I'm always happy to help and educate. I think, that's first and foremost the most important. Everyone should just know what they're buying, not just sign a check or pay by credit card and not know what they're getting.
Oh, absolutely. I should have mentioned that to begin with, but we are going to put your contact information in the comment section below, and it'll be very prevalent so people can reach out to you if they've got follow-up questions. And I hope that they do reach out to you, Ben. Ben, thank you again for joining me today. This was a great presentation, really learning about all the different cybersecurity insurances out there. So really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ara. I really had a great time.
Okay.